What is up? Good morning, good morning, good morning. Happy Monday to you all. We are back. You are listening to the ASTROLABE. I am the ASTROLABER? I don't know. The show is brought to you by King Pilled. You are watching on the King Pilled YouTube channel or perhaps on the King Pilled Twitter account operated by yours truly. At Real King Pilled on Twitter. What's going on, guys? So Mark Metz here in the chat. I said, he had some early birds in the chat, and I said, greetings and salutations. And he said, salutations reminds me of Eugene from the kids' radio program, Adventures in Odyssey. I know you know what I'm talking about, Matt. Oh boy, do I ever. I haven't thought about the Adventures in Odyssey in, man, so long. The soundtrack of my childhood was the Adventures in Odyssey. I need to find those. I need to introduce those to my son. Of course, now I feel like I need to go re-listen to him again, just to make sure, like, what exactly am I introducing him to? I'm my poor wife. My poor wife has to tolerate me. When he's watching shows about dinosaurs, and I'm like, fake, or something about the vastness of space. I'm like, fake. She's like, shut up. Let him enjoy himself. Got to make sure I plant the seeds early. He's a little engineer brain. It's just insane to me what he comes up with, what he's able to do at such a young age. His brain is just wired that way. And it's also, he's so engineer brained that he's almost a little bit of a sociopath. Part of that's just being a 3-year-old boy. And part of it is that he's like, if I do this, what happens? Oh, you scream. Interesting. Don't scream too loud, please, because I don't like that. But that's interesting. I learned how to make you scream. What if I try this? Does that make you scream? Oh, it does too. Interesting. Which, of course, is just absolutely maddening. Boys. Wonderful boys. Speaking of boys, check this out. We started the last show off this way, but I liked it so much that I think I want to do it again. Remember, it is White Boy Summer. I've got 2 White Boy Summer clips back to back for you here. Let's go. Come on. Time to get hyped up.
Get the fuck out of bed, bitch. Go. Get up, and then they got go. Time to wake up, bitch, get up. Get up, bitch, get up.
Yes! You guys are welcome for that one. Oh, how's that for a change? Oh man. You guys are very welcome. I would love it if I was just going throughout my day and somebody randomly dropped that on me. Like, it'd be better than, I don't know, like doing a line of coke. Just instantly like, Rah! I'm going to tackle the entire world all at one time. Josh Ham has been up since 4 a.m. Good for you, boy. Good for you. Yeah, this is probably that particular clip, given that I'm playing it at 10:37 in the morning. That's probably better for our West Coast viewers. But I know they're out there. So to the West Coast viewers, hopefully I caught you mid commute or something like that, and you were bouncing in your seat just like I was. So that's the first White Boy Summer clip. Let's get another one in here. This is the one. Now, so this episode is absolutely getting demonetized for sure, 100%. Given the clips that I have to play for you, the different subjects, the buzzwords we're going to be hitting on, 100%. Honestly, I might be a little lucky if I don't get the video taken down. We'll see. We'll see if we can dance around this stuff well enough. But So if you'd like to support the channel, then please do so with a super chat or becoming a channel member, or go to kingpill.com and you can sign up to join the Kingpill Discord. So here, let's do another White Boy Summer clip before my mind runs away with itself.
Alrighty, here we go.
Just dudes being dudes. They are terrible golfers, but I got to give it to them. Those hips don't lie. These white boys have been working it. They can dance. Like who doesn't want to just go out with your bros on the golf course and just start like choreographing dances together, hip thrusting and dancing on the golf cart. They look pretty slick on the golf cart. The swings before that were brutal, but the dancing on the golf cart, that was pretty slick. And it's great too. You got a bunch of guys who can't really golf, and they're like, "Hey, we're gonna go to a golf course. We're gonna go around and golf, but we're also gonna film a video in the meantime." Obviously, they did the one in the water last. I would assume. This is making me miss golf. I haven't golfed in way too long. All right. So we got another. Let's see here. Another couple lighthearted clips. This one made me like blow a snot bubble earlier today when I saw it. You'll see why. Oh, sorry. The caption was hardcore cherry picking. I'm gonna get that one more time. I mean, I gotta imagine that can't be great for the cherry trees, can it? Just thinking about everything that I know about vibrations and resonance and all that, frequencies, all that sort of thing, is I gotta imagine that's got to be somehow structurally bad for the trees, and it just makes them produce shitty cherries. One of the great ironies of the modern age is that we can mass produce all of these things, but the act of mass producing them makes them much shittier. So that one just, I'm sitting here scrolling and I'm like, oh, this is interesting. I thought it was going to be something of like this. It was going to like zoom in and show some sort of technique for picking them or something. I don't know why I would have thought that. Of course they've got the giant like vibrating arm, the giant vibrator for the cherry. Brrr, brrr. Okay, this one here, Euthanasia says, is this like a good news then bad news kind of stream? Well, it's like a lighthearted and then kind of dark. There's going to be some stuff in this that gets a little dark, but it's some of the things that I'm thinking about right now and trying to make sense of, trying to piece together. And so I'll figure I'll share them with you guys and signal boost some friends in the process. But anyways, before we get to that, and then we're going to end on a more lighthearted note. Before we get to that, this is in the vein of White Boy Summer. Not all things white boy are of the same manner, shall we say. This is equally a beautiful example of White Boy Summer. This chick, Claire Zagorski, she says, I know I'm far from the first person to say this, but the I hate cats to I found this perfect baby angel in the trash and I will take a bullet for her pipeline is one of the few pure things left on this earth. Check out this guy.
I hate cats. I hate cats. And this is what happened. She was under our AC unit at work. I didn't want her to die under there. and then her stench to make our whole fucking shop reek of decomposition. And now I've been carrying her around in a little pocket for about a week. I love you, this stuff. Just gotta end. She's a master manipulator. She's... What's wrong, sweetheart? You hungry? What's wrong? Do you need me to kill someone for you? What's wrong? I'll do it.
This is a man in his element. This is it's a good thing when you've got a man in this spot.
Anything. I'm in dad mode. What's up? What's up?
I could tell you, if you've ever had a small creature look at you like that, you know that that's the stuff that enables men to do great things, is when a small, vulnerable creature looks up at them like that, looks them in the eye, softly blinks, and then dozes off, leaned up against them. That's the whole reason why, like, men exist. Men exist just to experience that. And everything else is built around that. Because that's the thing that makes life. You want to cultivating that spirit in a man is what makes him want to feel alive, makes him want to do things, makes him want to build. We need this sort of thing. We need that. You should force yourself to sit and consume that kind of content. Just take it. Like, even if you think it's done cynically, just sit there and assume that it's real. Assume that it's legitimate and just let yourself experience it and rewire your brain to focus on the things that matter. Suit and Tie Guy says, hey, thanks for actually naming Uncle Doomer yesterday. I actually sent him your interview with Oren. Naming Uncle Doomer, you got to remind me of who that is. I'm not sure what that's a reference to, but I'm glad. I'm glad that worked. That reminds me, interview I recorded on Friday night with Buck Johnson over at Counterflow and Jason at the 2-Bit Podcast. We had a really good conversation. Buck was like, he's like, I told my producer we want to keep it within an hour and 5 minutes. Like, that's the goal. And like an hour and 35 minutes later, we wrapped up. We talked his ear off, but I think it was a really good conversation. That'll be dropping tomorrow. So yeah, I'm kind of giving a chance here for Suit and Tie Guy, if he's still there, to reply and remind me of the Uncle Doomer reference. Was this something on Twitter or something on YouTube? Oh, I played a video from his Twitter account. Okay, cool. Right on. Well, I'm glad. I hope he enjoys the interview. Was it, let's see, the interview with Oren. So it was talking about PayPal Mafia stuff. So if that's something that he's interested in, then if he wants to hear more, then he could also listen to my conversation with AA. That one you either have to find it on BitChute or you have to be a member of AA's YouTube membership. But then, and also the one that most people have mentioned to me is the Pete Quinones one. That's brought some very interesting connections my way. A lot of people have heard that. Pete is a much bigger mover and shaker than I think most of us appreciate, like truly appreciate. I've understood this for a while now, but he has some very interesting people who listen to him. People who are movers and shakers themselves. His audience is very high quality. I have no idea how large his audience is. I could sort of kind of triangulate, but podcast audiences are a little bit difficult to figure out because podcast listeners are kind of a unique breed. Some of them have a presence on other platforms that you can kind of triangulate with. Some of them don't. They're just all they do is they listen to the podcast, and you never find their impression anywhere else. So there's a lot of shows that you might see that don't get a lot of that publicly don't seem to have a huge audience that actually have a really big audience. So yeah, Pete is a national treasure. He is doing the Lord's work, and it's good to call him a friend. All right. So another one here that is an interesting, oh, come on, go away, ads. I don't want your shit. I can't even see the whole, okay, I got to scroll all the way up to see the whole headline. And, okay, stupid drop-down ads. So this is Daily Mail. Modern day dandy, 25, who has dressed only in Regency period clothes since burning his jeans at 14, says his eccentric attire has seen him receive countless offers of marriage. Zach Pinsett, 25, from Hove, this is back in 2019, has only worn historical clothing for the past decade. All outfits are researched and sewn by Zach, with some taking a year to perfect. Age 14, he burned jeans on bonfire, but got serious about dandy style at 17. He has a large online following and said he's received many marriage proposals. He's a tailor from East Sussex, and typical daily looks for the self-styled man include a pair of knee-high riding leather riding boots, a floral waistcoat, and riding jacket with long tails. So here is a video you can see of him. Imagine seeing this guy just walking down the street. I think this needs to be a trend. He did this 5 years ago, but there should be more men doing this. I'm telling you right now, there is serious demand for this sort of thing. There is serious popular demand for this. There's a spirit for it. Look how freaking cool he looks. Bring back the day when men could walk around with canes. And not like old men, but young men. This is a whole vibe. Like, you can't look at this and not feel the whatever latent aristocratic spirit you have bubbling up in you. There is power to this. If you had imagine having a men's group, you create a men's fraternal order that has some public facing element to it. And then you all dress like this exclusively. Like, this is like the hallmark of that order. Everyone's like, oh, you see that guy dressing like that? Oh, yeah, he's from such and such. Interesting. And then you take that fraternal order and you actually become known as people that are doing what do you call it? Like community projects, establishing yourself as a valuable member of your local community who's paying for improvements. Maybe like you overhaul a park, you completely fix it up and make it super nice and add some really cool features to it, whatever, and just donate it to the community. If you could have little pockets of these in every single city, and I mean there could be 20 cities with each with 10 pockets of 10 guys or something. And you're talking, what is that? A couple thousand people? They could move mountains. There is a deep spiritual power to that sort of thing. Beige and navy don't go together. I actually kind of like it. It bothers me that this red and this red are different. But I actually don't mind the beige and navy. I wonder if this is the same red and it's just the light makes it look different. Those are some sick boots. John Lloyd says, yo, just leaving the skate park. First time in 3 years. Distribute my morning king pill, please. Hell yeah. Way to go, John. See, now this is what he used to look like. And he could still look like that. This is him dressed in modern wear. And it would be, honestly, it would be a little hard to improve on this. He's younger here, it looks like, but yeah, 14. But he just seems to have the physiognomy for this. This just immediately transforms him from dorky dweeb to aristocrat. This guy looks like he makes important decisions, even if he doesn't. Like, it's entirely just a LARP. But this is what it does to my brain. My brain says, "Oh, that guy makes important decisions. That guy is doing significant things off somewhere. He knows people." He looks a little doofy back here because the clothes don't fit him. But he's definitely improved as he's gotten older. That's a little... The high waters, I don't know about that. I'm sure Cooper's going to have an opinion about this. The flowy high waters are kind of a little sketchy. Yeah. Anyways, he said most of the reaction when people stop him in the street is good. I just like this. This is a man taking his autistic impulses and directing them towards something that is a net positive impact on the world around him. And you don't have to necessarily dress Victorian. You can just dress, just dress up. But having like that particular bit that you're known for, and having it be something that's really jarring and eye-catching, but basically everything else that's jarring and eye-catching today is degenerate in some way. It's like weird colors or patterns or stuff that's really discordant. Whereas this is jarring in a really, in a like, whoa, you kind of like stop and admire for a minute. We need more of this. Okay, so we're gonna get something. Oh, come on, don't freeze on me. Okay, so I've got two different AI videos to show you here. One of them is from 9 months ago. It says, I asked AI to make a Donald Trump gym commercial. And part of why I'm showing you this is because this is 9 months ago, and then I'm going to show you something else.
Are you tired of low energy? Well, look no further. Introducing Trump's Fitness, the greatest gym you've ever seen, just like me. Unlike Sleepy Joe's gyms, we believe in results, not excuses. At Trump's Fitness, we believe in winning. Our equipment is top-notch. Our trainers are the best. And our members are winners, just like me. Don't settle for second best. Join Trump's Fitness today and make fitness great again. Remember, we're the heavyweight champions, leaving Biden's gyms in the dust. It's time to take back your power. You can do anything, so go grab them by the dumbbell.
All right, so that was 9 months ago. Now watch this one. This is Aristophanes on Twitter said, this is dope. AI is going to offer a strange grab bag of interesting things in the near term.
I was there, Gandalf. I was there 3,000 cycles ago. Isildur snagged the chip. I was there the day the guts of Netrunners flatlined.
Even the tiniest hacker can change the future's code. The chip must be wiped. You must breach into Arasaka Tower to insert it back into the AI's core. The gig is yours, Frodo. If you can't pull it off, no one can.
You have my blade.
And you have my sniper.
And my hacks. The chip's activated. It's picked up its creator's signal.
It is in the Netrunners that we must place our hope.
The Nine have left Arasaka. They'll track down the chip and kill the one who carries it.
All this struggle for such a small chip.
They're taking the hackers to Arasaka.
The chip will try to hack your mind.
He suffered, Gandalf. He did.
Access denied!
Isn't that freaking cool? I would watch that. Even in its, like, if you made a full-length feature film that was at its current level of development, where it's obviously AI, it's obviously not real, it's right kind of in the uncanny valley, but there's not so much talking, it's more just, you just have like the voiceovers. I would watch it as is. The full-scale adaptation of Lord of the Rings to like a post-apocalyptic cyberpunk aesthetic. It is... See... What's almost as cool to me as that thing itself existing is the fact that somebody thought to make that. Somebody came up with that idea and was like, hey, let's do Lord of the Rings in a post-apocalyptic cyberpunk adaptation, and then came up with all the transpositions to translate it into that, whether it's the particular names of places or my hacks instead of my axe. It's the good friend of the show, random username, who's in the chat often. He's been on this for 2 years or something now. He's been talking about how AI video is going to get so good that it's by default going to take out the major studios. Major studios aren't going to be able to compete because they're going to be way too bloated, not able to function as quickly. So they'll have massive budgets, but what they can accomplish with those massive budgets won't be appreciably different than what the really stripped down dude in his basement sort of production studio can accomplish. So it's going to have in terms of if you're very worried about like the Hollywood, the effect of the Hollywood propaganda media machine, which is interesting. A lot of people go from being concerned about that phenomena itself to just concerned about the people behind it. So then they sort of lose the concern about the thing itself. To be opposed to a degeneracy, it's kind of it takes that opposition to degeneracy and transposes it onto a group of people, which then allows the degeneracy to sort of like it's not under the microscope anymore, so it can seep back in. It's quite the clever little trick. But if you're worried about the sorts of negative effects on the masses of the mass-produced media, well, they're terminating themselves. They've put all of their eggs in all these different baskets that are now breeding their own destruction, their own demise. You can't build a global empire on ostensibly free trade and manage, by definition, the most complex system of all time. It's like the most complex system made up of all of the most complex systems. You can't manage something like that while you're explicitly cultivating a competency crisis. Ultimately, what's going to happen is the competent people are going to figure out the exploit. They're going to figure out the way around it. Which means there's really two different regimes. There's the more competent people who are actually doing the things, and then there's the less competent people who are out on the front lines. And as long as those two are aligned, then things are going to proceed hunky-dory. They can kind of keep a balance between themselves and keep the thing moving forward. But as they become more and more disaligned, then eventually the front, the one that everyone can see, is going to crash and burn on something, and the back end will have been, in the meantime, building the contingency plans to just export themselves out of that situation. Maybe throwing themselves behind a new front that's ready to keep things steaming along. But the idea that the front-facing, the what would you say, like the values or the ethos or the spirit of the front-facing institutions are necessarily the same as the back. It's an assumption. It's an unproven assumption. And I'm not suggesting something. I'm not saying this is the case. I'm saying if you're approaching this from a problem-solving perspective, you have to accept that it's very plausible that this sort of coalition is like the front-facing part of the coalition has its own values that it's projecting, and those are the reasons it's a part of that coalition. But the back-facing part of the coalition, the more under-the-surface part of the coalition, may not necessarily share those same values. Which means you've got a hypothetical group of people who exist in the shadows, who are working towards some end, but who knows what it is? By definition, they're laying low. They're trying to keep their intentions hidden. I'm just thinking. I'm not going anywhere with this. I'm just thinking it through in real time. Duffhead says, Matt, have you heard some of the AI country songs that have come out recently? Yeah, they're really good. They're really they're very, like, they capture the spirit really, really well. Even some of the like subtle stuff. Nephilim says, this will become a parallel economy. I'm here for it. Yeah, I think it already is happening. It's pretty clear that the parallel economy has been being built. So now there's the people who think that the way to affect change is to be the ones who are yelling the loudest about how bad all the existing things are. But that you're kind of falling into you're it's like you're arguing with the canary in the coal mine. And it's like, yeah, these things are gay and corrupt and degenerate because that's the nature of the system. It breeds these decayed, corrupt, degenerate things. But like sitting there and yelling at them isn't going to do anything. You might as well be standing in front of a wall and you're just yelling at it instead of kissing it. You could also just not engage with the wall. I've been starting to get a lot more prejudiced toward negativity. Any sort of pessimism or cynicism, if I see it, like videos like any sort of rage porn or gore porn or something, no, I'm flipping past it. I went and unfollowed a bunch of larger accounts that are just, I feel like I would agree with them on a lot of things, and I would probably enjoy hanging out with them in person, but they've developed a character online, and that character's explicit purpose is just to demoralize. And there doesn't need to, there's so many reasons to be positive and optimistic and hopeful about the future. And even just on a fundamental level, even if you think the future is pessimistic, the only way, or how would I say this? If the future is pessimistic and you want it to be less pessimistic, or you want the worst things to come slower, a pretext for that even being possible is the belief that it's possible, which means necessarily you have to be optimistic about something. You have to project that optimism, because when you project that optimism, this is not like the whole law of attraction, The Secret sort of thing. They're not looking at nothing. There is something about human focus and intention and consciousness, like directing that consciousness at something that brings it about, that brings it into reality. I was thinking about this last week, that if you imagine, if you're looking at the human creative process, so God is a creator who created creators. And the human creative process, it's like you sit here and you visualize something. We say you visualize something in your mind's eye. Like you imagine building a little shape here in front of you. Let's say you're going to build a little pyramid here on your desk. You're going to fashion it out of brick or whatever. You're going to mold it out of clay. So you sit here and you make a projection with your mind in front of you of this shape. So at some place in your mind, you have placed a shape in this particular spot in space and time. And then you go and you accumulate different things and you bring them and you make that thing appear. You use your senses, you use your ability to see and smell and touch and grasp and all these different things to interact with your external environment and to manifest something that was not there before. And it could be like a novel shape. It could be a shape that's never existed. And you form this shape that's never existed before. And it now fills this spot in space and time where it was not before. And then you can duplicate that. So you basically just reached into the fabric of reality and pulled out a thing. So the idea that you can't do this with your mind is what mediates all of this. Your mind was where you visualized that thing in the first place. And your mind is what directed your hands and your feet and your eyes and whatever else to go to do the motions necessary to make that thing that doesn't exist. So then the idea that you can't just take your mind and make something exist without necessarily using your hands, it's like an unfounded presupposition. And there's abundant evidence that the human mind is capable of affecting capable of affecting material reality simply with its focus. You can look at the studies that have been done on random number generators and the human mind being able to change the probability distribution outcome, whatever, with random number generators. Or I think I told you guys before about the experiment where they, there's one experiment where you You show someone a picture, and then you have them choose a word that they associate with that picture, and you flash one of the words to them subconsciously before you actually have them make the choice. And it's like, oh, it makes your subconscious can see it because it changes the way that you choose. So that kind of sets the first stage, which is your subconscious mind can see things that your conscious mind can't, which isn't really that groundbreaking now. Most people are pretty aware of that. But then they flash the word after the person makes their choice, and it still affects their choice, which means there's only two options. Either the person, without being aware of this happening, the person is reaching into the future to see something telepathically and then making a choice based on that. So you got telepathy on one hand, or the person, when they make their choice, they are telekinetically affecting the computer that's generating the option, the random number generator that is generating the result for them afterwards. So it's either telepathy or telekinesis, but these are things that human beings are capable of. And if human beings are capable of doing this, then the question becomes, are you just going to do this blindly? Where you're just going to kind of emotionally spew your negativity and pessimism and cynicism everywhere, and in so doing, direct your consciousness at bringing about those things that you claim to be opposed to? Or are you going to take active control and say, no, I'm not going to project those things because I don't want to be party to manifesting those things if I claim to be opposed to them. So instead, I'm going to set my mind at manifesting the positive world that I want to see, manifesting the values that I want to see, only believing exclusively that they exist and looking for them, fixating my mind on it. Your mind is the most powerful tool that you have, and it operates whether you're aware of it or not. This isn't like, oh, I'm going to pull my mind out of the closet and start using it instead of not using it. No, you've been walking around using it. You're just using it like haphazardly. It's up for sale, and so it's being possessed and pulled along. This is a lead into some of the stuff, a couple of the clips I'm going to play for you guys in a little bit. So, like by relentlessly focusing on the worst things that could happen, you are actually playing a role in bringing them about. And this actually explains a lot of conspiracies as well. This phrase keeps coming back to my mind that Tucker Carlson used, a conspiracy of interest. And the Hollywood effect, the mass media degenerating effect that it has, this is actually, like, if you understand this, you'll understand that all of these things that are happening are much less of an explicit conspiracy by malevolent people than you may think. Because if the media has presented, especially through Hollywood, through the movies, the TV industry, it's presented all of these outcomes to us over and over and over and over and over again. I see this when I sit down and I watch just a normal TV show about the cops or the special investigators or whatever. And I'm sitting here watching as they're having these conversations, and I'm like, this isn't what the world actually looks like. The world doesn't function this way. At no point do people ever talk to each other this way. Do they ever say the sorts of things that they're saying in this interaction? They don't actually think this way. The real world doesn't actually function this way. But the vast majority of people are never in that experience. So for them, they sit and they passively consume this entertainment content, and it wires their brain to think that the world looks a certain way. So then they begin acting as if the world looks that certain way. They're like, latently, subconsciously, as they're going throughout their day, they're assuming that there's someone somewhere having these sorts of conversations and operating in this sort of manner. And that this is how these different, whether it's the cops or the FBI or the State Department or whatever, that this is the way that they're thinking and operating. Because for the vast majority of people, all that we have is just movies, TV shows, whatever like that. That's all we have to operate from. So then by projecting this into people's minds, and people sit there and they consume it and they begin incorporating those assumptions into their lives, they actually begin manifesting it. They're actually making that thing that's not reality become reality through their latent assumptions. By believing that there's a cabal of secret violent white men, they're actually manifesting a cabal of secret violent white men. The big regime boogeyman. They're actually bringing it into existence. So then what is the spirit that possesses that cabal of angry, violent white men that didn't exist before, but it's coming into existence? Where did that spirit come from? How does that spirit that spirit was manifested by people? So what spirit is that? Did all of these people who are obsessed and fearful of the cabal of angry, young, violent white men, are they manifesting the Holy Spirit? I'd be pretty surprised. They're manifesting another spirit. Who knows what spirit it is? But they're manifesting it by projecting their own fears and insecurities and pessimism and cynicism out into the world. Yeah, like Taylor Brown says, i.e. the bad guy knows our every move. Right. If you assume that you have an enemy who knows your every move and has already plotted it out and is already going to beat you to the punch and there's nothing you can do, then you are making that a reality. Whether it is a reality or not, you are guaranteeing that it's a reality. Taylor says, Hollywood has created an ecosystem that leads many to believe that life and hierarchical systems are much more orchestrated and controlled than they actually are. Correct. Yes. These things are much more, I don't want to say emergent because that kind of makes it seem like they're going from non-existent to existent, but they're emergent on our perceptual plane, like on our conscious perceptual plane. They seem to be emergent. But it's not that they're emerging from nothing. They're emerging from the spiritual, we don't have the words for this, the spiritual domain, which is a very real domain. That is, it's like the other side around from us. It's like on the inverse of us. This is what the ancients called the heavens. The heavens are just like the not us. And it's there. And there are entities there who are going around doing their stuff, and we're interacting with them, whether we are consciously aware of it or not. And there's a, do I dare say a science? There's a science to the way, there's a logic to the way this world works. It's not just random chaos. There's actually an extreme structure and order to this realm. But most of us aren't even conscious of it. Most of us aren't even aware of it. Even when we are interacting with it, and our subconscious knows we're interacting with it, our conscious mind isn't aware of it. Because our entire culture has been wired and programmed to believe that it's not there. And were there people who did this intentionally because they knew what they were doing and they wanted people to not believe that that is there? Yes. That's a very, very small group of people in relative numbers. The overwhelming vast majority of people who you think that you're at war with, who you see as a malevolent actor, who you have open rank hostility toward, the two of you are just equal sides of this pawn. You're trapped in a pawn-to-pawn relationship. And their hostility toward you was programmed into them just the same as your hostility toward them. Who did that programming? St. Paul said we wrestle not against flesh and blood, but against principalities and powers of the darkness. This is what those principalities and powers of the darkness are. So I got a little ahead of myself getting to that already, but I wanted to highlight this as kind of a I told you so, that the popular culture is turning against the Longhouse, turning against the school marms. Ex-Trump prosecutor Nathan Wade answers racy questions about Fani Willis' relationship in cringeworthy interview. So, New York Post sees this as cringeworthy. This is interesting. This is Marlon Wayans on The Daily Show, playing a Borat-style character named Quan, mocked his romance with Willis. So he's talking to the guy, the Trump prosecutor in Georgia, who had a controversial sexual relationship with Fulton County District Attorney Fani Willis. So he goes on The Daily Show. So think about what's implicated here. You've got a black guy who had a controversial sexual relationship with a black woman who's the ultimate black woman girl boss going after Trump, who's made it her entire career to going after Trump. And they're now going on The Daily Show, which is TDS Central. So a couple of years ago, these people were hailed as national heroes. There was like I don't know, like a statue was going to be built for them. These were like these were people to be hailed and worshipped and glorified. Now look at what happens with them.
So let me ask you, when old girl was like, "Hey babe, you want to be in charge of this prosecution of the president of the United States who did this insurrection," did you think like, this could get messy? Or you was like, nah, I'll be all right?
We did not have that type of relationship at the outset, and we were interviewing other people for the position.
So he's answering the question seriously. Like he thinks he's here to have like a serious conversation about the issue. Like this is him doing his PR campaign for himself and for her probably.
Position.
What position was it?
It was the position of special prosecutor.
Did that position look like this? Or did that position look like this?
So no.
After Wade resigned as special prosecutor.
So he may have known that he's coming onto a comedy show. He probably knows that he's going to get punked in some way, but in all of his body language and the way that he's trying to talk through this, it sure doesn't look like he's being made the straight man. They're mocking him. They're mocking her too. This is kind of how SNL and all of these late night shows were 30, 40 years ago. They were irreverent and norm busting and doing like the off-color humor and all this sort of stuff that was poking fun at the people in power. We're being told by the rest of the media that Fani Willis is this like paragon of excellence of American society and that her name's going to go into the history books because of the way she bravely has put her career on the line to go after Trump. So typically for the last, however, 10 years or so, when these sorts of cultural figures would go onto the Blue America sacred programs, they would go there to have their knobs slobbed, so to speak. But that's not what's happening now. Now he's getting, not only is he being mocked and made fun of, she's being mocked and made fun of. I was shocked to see this. It's not that I'm shocked that they would do something degenerate, but that they would feel like there is number one, they have the latitude to make fun of, to be like demeaning and making fun of the sacred hallowed black woman who's going against Orange Hitler. And that they would think that there is a demand for this content. That those people who ostensibly don't exist, we've been told and conditioned by them and their ilk, that someone who would find something like this funny and not be like pearl clutching about it, we're told those people don't exist. But this is a tacit admission that those people do exist. The people who don't like what is happening to Trump. The people who think that Fani Willis is a reincarnation of Kamala Harris, and not in a good way. They're acknowledging that market is out there. They're aware of it, and they're pivoting toward it. which again should be a nail in the coffin of the idea that these kinds of people, the typical blue America media actor, celebrity, musical artist, yada, yada, yada. The idea that these are like dyed-in-the-wool ideologues. They're not. They're just following what the popular winds of culture tell them to follow. They're shallow, empty people. Who knows if they can even rotate a shape in their head? Probably not. This is Charles Haywood's point, that the overwhelming majority of the population are basically just programmed automatons who are wired to just follow popularity trend. Oh, popularity trend, follow it. And then every time that they're publicly talking about it, they genuinely see themselves as one lone individual against the world. Like, you guys put this trend out. See, isn't all this stuff true? You guys all told me all this was true. That's why I'm believing it's true. These are not our enemies. It's not that they're not our enemies because they're our friends. It's that they're not our enemies because they're you could hardly consider them people. I believe they are people. I believe they're human beings who have souls, but they are so captivated by whatever spirit they're attuned to that these are not self-conscious, rational, willing beings. They're completely in the thrall of whatever spirit is guiding them along. And they should be treated that way and related to that way. Like, you're not the problem here. You're just manifesting the symptoms of the problem. We need to get at the root of the problem. And going to war with them is not... You don't gain anything by like doing untoward things to whatever random generic people are out walking around the street, or even the prominent celebrities. So this leads us in to a couple of clips that I have for you guys. Now, these are going to be a little bit longer. I might pause and comment on them a little bit, but mostly the reason I'm sharing this is, number one, to signal boost a couple of guys that I like, and number two, because I think these thoughts are very interesting and I want to share them with other people, and I might as well just share them. I don't really need to say anything about them. That's part of what the Astrolabe is about. So there's going to be some long listening here. I think one clip is probably going to be 8 or 10 minutes, and then the other one is a little closer to 20 minutes. But the first one here is from Uber Boyo. And then we'll end up, after I show you these two clips here, we'll wrap with some Thomas Massie content that is, it'll be a little bit of a palate cleanser after we go into some kind of dark spaces. Okay, so the first one here, relating to this idea of the mass consciousness of people manifesting spirits. This is Uber Boyo. He says, Wotan, did Carl Jung think Hitler was possessed? Here's where I'm hoping that this video is on YouTube and it stayed up there, so I'm going to assume that that I'll be able to keep it going. Now, there's the possibility here, because this is content posted on YouTube, that it may drop off. I'm going to try to pause it every so often and say something just to prevent it from picking up on the fact that this is someone else's content, but it may fall off on the live stream and may not be able to keep going. If that's the case, it's still streaming on X, so you can go over and you can listen on X as I'm playing through this clip, because this clip's on YouTube, the next one's not. So I'm also going to speed it up to 1.5. I know some of you guys don't like this, but I also don't want to have this take forever. So here we go.
Jung's Red Book was all these great visions of fields of blood and dead corpses. And of course, this happened the year before World War I. And Jung was freaking out, saying to himself, oh my God, I'm going crazy. I'm seeing things. I got to blow my brains out. He used to sleep with a gun underneath his pillow because he thought something bad was going to happen to him. He thought he was going to wake up naked the next day covered in oil and everybody be laughing at him or something like this. He was going to go batshit insane. And instead of facing that humiliation, he was saying he should off himself. But then World War I kicked off and he started to see all these visions he was having manifest in real life, all these people going into the trenches and murdering themselves across Europe. And he was relieved. He was saying to himself, yeah, baby, I'm not crazy. Yeah, war, thank God.
So basically, Carl Jung was essentially having prophetic visions about the coming World War. He was seeing it. He was seeing it coming somehow. Obviously, there's been prophets throughout all of time that have had, in all different ages, there's been people that have this prophetic ability to see the future, which relates to what we were just talking about. That this is even latent in the average person, is the ability to see the future in some way. Most of the time, when we experience it, we just don't know what we're experiencing, or we don't remember it. It's just our subconscious mind is picking these things up. But this sort of phenomenon is just devastating to the notions of the like rational material blank slate, the entire conception, all the conceptions that the whole modern liberal project have been built upon are just completely detonated by this sort of thing. And increasingly, what we're seeing is an awareness of this sort of stuff with Nietzsche and Jung and Evola and Ernst Jünger. All these are being manifested into the culture, so the popular mind is becoming more and more aware of this sort of phenomenon.
I'm not a crazy guy. Of course, everyone else is like, you kind of sound like a crazy guy now, but whatever. And he realized that, of all things, in this very rational age, he kind of said to himself, I think I just channeled a prophecy. I think I was just possessed, and some type of visionary future poured through me and showed me something. And in order for me to receive this prophecy, to become a vessel for this prophecy, I almost had to be destroyed as a consequence. Now,
so there's a interesting point there that Jung is identifying. He's receiving this prophecy from somewhere. He doesn't know what's happening. Now, I'm sure it probably is not unrelated to whatever other sorts of activities that he was engaged in. I would be very surprised, knowing who Carl Jung was, if he was not actively seeking out this sort of thing. And he maybe didn't realize that's what he was doing at first or something like that. But the people who actively seek out this sort of thing, there's a like 100% report rate that, yeah, they actually get it. Like this ability to look into the future, to see the future, to engage with the future and bring it back. Like this is a well-documented phenomenon. Look who is here today.
Hey, what's up?
The Rizless Loser. What's going on, man?
Not much. How's it going? Well, I'm Rizless, so there's that.
Was it wife rejected my advances a minute ago? He got shot down.
So yeah, I decided to come commiserate with you. And this, how many people we got? 51 people taking money from their companies and not working.
Yes, we are happy to help you plunder Globocorp with your attention.
Indeed.
Direct your attention toward us. Josiel says 1.5 is the greatest thing I never thought I could take. Then when I did, I realized I could pay attention without my mind wandering. Right. I can't listen to stuff like if it's played normal speed now. My mind will just kind of gets distracted. But probably the worst thing to me is that YouTube will only go up to 2x. And after you've listened to 2x for a while, your mind is rewired and you could do 2.25 or 2.5. I've been able to get up to 3 or like 3.2 with some people on Amazon or on Audible, because you can go way up on Audible. I think you can go to 4x or something. But
anything above like 1.75 and I start, like my ability to distinguish between one sound and another disappears, so it just sounds like a bunch of...
Well, maybe if you... See, I don't know, maybe this is just certain people are wired differently. I don't know, but like at first I wasn't able to do it, but after I did like 1.75 for a while, then I moved to 2 and it was easier for me to understand. And after that, then I was able to go up higher. So it's like you could teach your brain to keep up with it. And I actually find that the more that I do that, when I'm listening to something on 2x, it actually helps me focus more on other things that I'm doing. So it's like I kind of settle into this state where I can concentrate on both equally. I can't do that if the other thing involves reading or anything with words, reading or listening or anything like that. I can't listen to multiple things if I'm listening to something on 2x. But anyways, so we're listening to watching a clip from Uber Boyo. What do you think of Uber Boyo?
Generally, I like him. I mean, I'm not too familiar with him. I like him. I find the Nietzschean thing kind of boring, personally. And it's a dead end, but that's my opinion.
Yeah. He's
been doing it forever, though. And I'm like, at some point, do you grow beyond? You just keep reading the same Carl Jung books over and over.
I like his personality. I like his.
Yeah, it seems like a cool dude.
His vibe. He's very. I've chatted with him a couple of times, and he's a very, very sincere, authentic fellow, and he's an Irish lad.
Irishman, like me.
Yeah, like you. Worst about live is normal speed. Okay, we'll go back to the speedy stuff. Hopefully, if I'm breaking this up enough, then YouTube's not gonna end it. And if it does, if for whatever reason they do say, "Hey, you're doing copyrighted material," and they end the stream, just stay in the chat or go over. You can go over to X and pick it up, but the stream will pick back up again as soon as we stop streaming it. Then this is the only long YouTube clip I have today.
To go back to Hitler, you have to understand that Hitler had stuff like this surrounding him as well. Very eerie, weird coincidences. There was a gentleman called Franz von Stuck, who was a German symbolist painter, who liked to do stuff like channeling his dreams and his imagination and manifesting what he showed. And in 1889, which is the year of Hitler's birth, he painted a picture, which I'll show you now. Now, this picture is a picture of Wodan, the German god. And the subject of it is the wild chase. Wodan, the hunter god who stirs people up into the wild chase.
Now, let me see if... Will it let me zoom it in so you guys can see it better? So, this is... In the year that Hitler was born, this guy drew this or made this painting. And this is supposed to be Wodan. And he has a... you can see, he's going to mention it here in a second in the video, but you can see how much the guy actually looks like Hitler. Kind of another one of these very weird things where someone's pulling stuff from the future somehow and don't even... it's like something about what's out there is communicating something to ahead of time.
Dostoevsky had a lot of moments like that.
Yeah?
Yeah.
There's something about that era in time.
That era, yeah. There was a lot of...
It was like the membrane got kind of porous.
Yeah. Like Dostoevsky's another one of these kind of prophetic figures.
You could see from... There's all the different things that happen in the mid-1800s where in the space of like 10 or 12 years, you have the rise of Mormonism, Jehovah's Witness, Christian Science, Seventh-day Adventist. There's a couple others right around that same time in the U.S. And then you also have Marxism coming online. And it was like there's this membrane that got porous somehow. And I wonder what that's associated with. Like, is that associated with Napoleon? What caused that? Because I think there's another similar event that happened, which is something having to do with the nuclear bomb and the mass slaughter of World War II. Was another one of these things that thinned or made more porous the membrane between the physical and the metaphysical, and stuff came through.
It could also be that like a lot of these ideologies were kind of born out of the Enlightenment period. These are like the children of the Enlightenment. And with rationalism running abound and everyone thinking they're scientists and shit like that. And the only material exists.
Mm-hmm.
Like, the powers and principalities probably didn't have to, when people were all aware of these powers and these entities engaging with their daily life and messing with them, they had to get smart. But when the world was just taken over by materialism, rationalism, things of that sort, I suspect that you just shave off half a reality and you're not looking at it anymore. Well, you're just opening up the door. You just make everything easy. You're just making it easy for them.
What's interesting too is it's like
1800 up until the end of World War II or whatever. It's just the demons have it on easy mode.
Mm-hmm. It also corresponds to like the center of this is Queen Victoria, and becomes kind of like the archetype or the paragon of the female spirit, and like right after her reign, you have the initial parts of the feminist movement begin bubbling up.
What's interesting, and this will make some of the people spurg. I recall reading somewhere that Saint Elizabeth, the Grand Duchess of Russia, I believe it was her. Was it her? Her husband was the one who was blown up by. Was like the Tsar Nicholas's like brother or cousin or something like that was blown up by an anarchist. Well, she had in the preceding years, she had, in response to the imperial government allowing the Jewish pogroms and the displacement of the Russian Jews, she said that God was going to judge them for that. And then the Bolsheviks took over.
Ah, a prophetess.
Yeah.
The other mid-18th century phenomena that arose, obviously, would be like dispensationalism and
right.
Zionism.
Interesting, yeah. Right, and a lot of the early Zionists were Bolsheviks, basically.
Mm-hmm.
Like Russian Jews who came to Palestine.
Mm-hmm.
You had, like, you know, the English Jews, and then you had the Russian Jews, and they all they met in Palestine after their respective projects were kind of over in those particular countries.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so there was something in the mid 1800s where the membrane got kind of thin, and which is interesting. What immediately followed that was like a massive expansion in material wealth. You had the whole Gilded Age in the United States, and all the robber barons, and all you have the expansion out into the Wild West. And then in the 1900s, you have a similar thing where you have this period of kind of brooding crisis and massive bloody explosions in the middle part of the century. That's immediately followed by a massive expansion in material wealth and infrastructure, and a rise of a new set of robber barons, so to speak. So there's almost like this century cycle that humanity has gone through for the last couple of years. I'm sure you could probably find something in the 1700s. I don't know the 1700s well enough to draw the equivalent parallel, but obviously you had the French and Indian War, and you had the American Revolution,
the French Revolution,
yeah, and the latter part of the century. So it doesn't quite. It's not like there's something about those particular intervals, but there's an interesting cycle happening here. All right, so back to, I think we've got another 7 minutes or so on the video here.
Now, if you look at this very closely, first of all, it's got an eerie feeling to it generally, but look at Woden. He looks like Hitler. Now, Jung wrote about this in his essay called Wotan, where he discussed this problem. He discussed that Wodan, this ancient energy of the Germanic people, was waking up again, and that many things that were happening in this moment were being driven by some type of mystical force that was possessing everybody. He believed that Hitler became a voice for Wodan, and then the Wodan within all the German people was stirring things up into a frenzy. He went on to talk about how the German Christian religion, the Protestantism, is not necessarily Christian. It's almost like a kind of a cover that Wodan wears. The Protestant God is not the God of the Bible. That is Wodan.
This is so interesting.
Is it that part there was the reason I wanted to play the whole clip. The idea of German Protestantism being like a costume that Wodan is wearing.
Yeah, skin suit being worn by the old gods.
Yeah,
fascinating.
Yeah, and it's like each of them has there's something about the German people. There's something about them. The only terminology we really have to describe this sort of thing would be like racially or genetically, which are really clumsy terms. But there's something innate or fundamental to the Germanic peoples that hails back to their old gods. There's still like fragments of their old gods there, and something is happening that's causing that to be riled up and brought back up to the surface. And the German Protestantism becomes like the thing that they rally around, but it's just like a proxy for Wodan.
Well, I've had a theory for a long time, and I don't know that it's unique to me or a theory, but with the rise of all like the various like pseudo-Christian sects in the 1800s and early 1900s, like particularly in America, for example, as you were mentioning earlier, like the dispensationalism and the Seventh-day Adventists and the Mormons and the yada, 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 yada. You'll notice that core fundamental parts of these particular sects are like ancient heresies.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, my theory is it's like, it's the same demons.
Yeah.
know?
Yes. Yeah, the same spirits that animated those heresies they're finding new footholds.
Mm-hmm.
And what's interesting is that this is you can look at a lot of this as like humans have to invite this in.
Yeah.
Humans have to choose to, like, it's not, these heresies aren't something that are imposed upon people. They're things, like, if you could think of a heresy as being like a spirit, like a spiritual body, sort of. Human beings have to take that and choose it and bring it onto them. It isn't something that gets imposed onto them. They cry out for it, and they yearn for it, and they go find it. They direct their attention at it, and they find it and pull it into them.
A skin suit coming to kind of dance around with people and call people onto madness and frenzy. It is the racial soul, the oversoul being born through the churches type thing. Jung himself was in the presence of Hitler many times. He noticed Mussolini, for example, and he'd look at Mussolini and see in Mussolini this sort of like masculine, manly, kind of like Andrew Tate type character, you know, being like, yeah, bro, yeah, motherfuckers, like Mussolini's a big square jaw, big super Chad type character, creating fascism, creating this military state, all these types of things. But Hitler was different. Hitler was demure. Hitler was mystical. Hitler was like quite silent, the type of guy that was looking down at his toes, but then he would look up and he would have like vivid power. He had some type of like magical energy surging through him. And Jung actually made eye contact with Hitler once. And Jung, again, being very sensitive to this type of stuff because of the Red Book and all that, he made eye contact with him and he felt this huge feeling rush down him, like a chill running up his spine that was extremely overwhelming. It was like he could feel the energy coming out of Hitler's eyes. And Jung was so freaked out by this, so scared, that he left Germany the next day before the war, and that was it. He was done with it. He was like, that's bad juju right there. I'm not going with this as well. And he wasn't the only person who spoke like this. Ernst Jünger, who's a famous World War I veteran.
All right, I want to pause it just to. We need a break here so we don't get it get the stream hung up on us. So yeah, basically just I've heard this before that Jung saw Hitler and was kind of like, ugh, which is kind of, there was something about him that was more than human. And in looking at him, and this is something we're going to get into a little bit more on the next clip that I play, but yeah. So,
I mean, I've read stories. I don't know how much, you know, because that whole time period is full of, you know, wacky history, and then there's a lot of revisionism, and a fair amount of that is probably wacky too. So I don't hold. I'm pretty agnostic on that whole time period as it stands right now. We need another century or so before anyone can talk about that soberly. But there is sort of well, I mean, there are accounts that Hitler was super into the occult.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if that's true.
I think it's like undeniably true.
Okay. I've also heard stories that there were guards who used to, you know, hang out outside of Hitler's tent or his quarters or whatever, who claim, according to these stories, that they would literally see demons or like spirits going in and out of him while he was sleeping. Mm-hmm. I don't know if that's true or
there
not.
Was similar things with Napoleon. And if you watch this whole video,
as well as Stalin had similar.
This video, so it's on Uber Boyo's channel. Wotan, did Carl Jung think Hitler was possessed? If you watch this whole video, the whole thing's about 32 minutes. He talks about and reads some source material quotes of people talking about seeing about Napoleon and this little red spirit, like a little red man that he would communicate with, and that he looked out and there was like a red star in the sky that he followed that like would appear to him, and sometimes it appeared as a man and sometimes it appeared as a star.
It's like his genius.
Yeah. And you know, I didn't know about this. Robert Edward Grant mentioned in one of his videos that Napoleon went and slept in the Great Pyramid of Giza for a night, and when he came out, he was like profoundly changed and became a mathematician. And actually, there's a like Bonaparte's constant or something. There's a mathematical constant that he discovered, and it was shortly after that. You see this repeating pattern with these sorts of guys that. Like Caesar went and slept in the pyramid overnight, and then shortly after that was assassinated. Alexander the Great slept in the pyramid overnight. Shortly after that was assassinated. Napoleon slept in the pyramid, and shortly after that was deemed mad and sent to whatever the island. I can't remember the name of it. Yeah, there's this sort of thing. It's funny that we could live in such a laughably materialist world, given these are all stories of things that happened, and there's repeating patterns of this sort of thing happening up until like yesterday, basically. And then all of a sudden now, no. Well, No such thing. But now we're entering a period, I think, again, of these where the membrane is getting porous and is getting more porous. The relative porosity of it is changing. And we're beginning to see this sort of thing happen again, I believe.
The dim age, as it were.
Uh-huh, indeed. Yeah, the other interesting thing about having, well, we'll play this a little bit more and then I'll make that comment.
A very compelling, amazing man. He was pretty hardcore Nietzschean. He was a big supporter of the German nationalist movement. He hated communism. He hated liberalism. He hated all that left-wing nonsense. But he became very jaded with the Nazis.
He's talking about Ernst Jünger.
Mm-hmm.
During the war, he was in Paris, and he was echoing these observations that Jung was making. He was talking about that there was this force swirling around that he didn't quite like. He described Hitler as Nilbelo, which is this censorship that he had to do. He had to create a fake name about him. He wrote these novels about it, and he described him Nilbelo was sort of like a play on Nil to Diabolo or Nil to the devil. And he was talking about Hitler in these types of terms. He was worrying out loud that by us Germans abandoning our social bonds, we have unleashed something subterranean, something deeper, something older, something more wild. But quite a famous aspect of this is the Nazi occultist. You hear about this on the History Channel. It's a little bit cringe, but there's definitely some truth to this stuff. Allegedly, there was this Vril society or Huel society. Vril is almost like the Nietzschean idea of will, Vril will. This idea of these old pagan magical rituals that were set up in these magical societies, because the 19th century was quite a Jungian irony. The 19th century was probably the most clear-headed, rational century in all of recent history, but it was balanced by this deep fascination with the occult. It was like the shadow of 19th century Christian rationalism, and scientific rationalism was balanced with these guys going in and Ouija boards and stuff like this. And so
that's a really interesting observation there, and that ties into what I was going to say, which is that you mentioned how it's like we've had this complete shift to just focusing on the rational, the material, the logical, everything on the surface, everything that's visible. Nothing's if you can't see something, it's not real, and like an absolute ignorance of our own imaginations. We view our imaginations with suspicion and fear and skepticism. But if you understand the way that the material and the metaphysical worlds, I think the way that they interact, it's not like you took half of your attention away. It's not like you had 100% attention and these two worlds are like equally balanced halves of one whole, and you don't pay attention to one thing, so you just get 50% of your attention directed on 50% of the world. No, that's not how it works. This is our attention was turned 100% toward the material, the rationalist plane, speaking kind of metaphorically, and the act of doing that, like if you understand the power of the human consciousness, if you're focusing 100% of your consciousness on the material plane, so to speak, then you're just going to be like massively manifesting things from the spiritual world.
Right. And it's interesting. I like the way he phrases that, where like you kind of, the occult, all of this stuff, Ouija boards and all that, it's kind of like the shadow to the German Protestantism.
Mm-hmm.
And I think, when you abandon traditional Christianity, which is a worldview that accounts for all of these things in a framework that puts them in their proper place, and you just like all those Enlightenment guys, the early scientists were also obsessed with alchemy and weird, crazy shit,
Mm-hmm.
and Hermeticism and stuff, and there's all these secret societies and things. And it's like you can't, that instinct or that desire to engage with spiritual reality, that doesn't go away.
Right. Even if you're consciously not conscious of it, cognizant of it, there's still a part of you that's constantly engaging in that spiritual reality. You're just doing it blindly.
Yeah.
The Germans in the early 20th century had sort of developed one of these, a neo-pagan magical ritual, where they would get these oracles, these young women, these beautiful vril maidens, that would have been these Germanic Valkyries, and these women would go into trances, and they would contact some type of astral plane. They would get into the fifth dimension, and they would start to channel stuff, just like we were talking before. They would access, maybe in Jungian terms, the parts of their unconscious, or perhaps they were, going into the fifth dimension, as we said, and they would allow stuff to flow through them. And a big part of this was that they would gain knowledge. Now, the mythos, obviously we don't have an awful lot of stuff affirming this other than hearsay, but the mythos is that they would channel this vril, and in this, they would be presented with new technology and new ideas and visionary projects and whatnot. And this sounds a little bit wacky, but...
What's that?
That checks out.
Uh-huh.
That's how it goes.
Yes, and this is part of the reason why I think this project is so profound, is that this is not some artifact of the past. This is the birth of what I believe is really the spirit that's continuing to animate the regime today. The same sort of stuff. If you understand where all these Nazi scientists who were working on this, they're pulled into the CIA, they're pulled into the American intelligence communities, and you've got the whole thing with Nazi Antarctic bases, and now and shortly after this, all of a sudden Antarctica becomes a place nobody can go, and then you get a space program, and don't look at Antarctica, look at the moon. We went to the moon, look at the moon, like manifesting this feminist spirit, the spirit of the Longhouse being born right around the time you have this lunar obsession, which is meant to distract and disguise from whatever is happening in Antarctica. And then shortly after that, you see the Bretton Woods in 1973. You have this huge sharp shift, and now all of these charts all diverge there, and there's all this money that begins being created, and it just sort of disappears. Trillions of dollars just disappear. Where's it going? Well, now all of a sudden we're starting to see all these UFO stories, these UFO sightings.
Well, and backing up. Go ahead.
Well, to kind of sum that up, basically, you see the Nazis, they get into this deep occultic stuff, and they're like using young maidens to manifest these sorts of things, and that ties directly into them, Antarctica, and space lasers. He's going to talk about that here in a second, and the UFO phenomenon. And then that comes over to America, and then all these things begin being associated with America. And now you're seeing everyone's saying that there's going to be some sort of big reveal about the UAPs. All of these things are all a continuation, I think, of this same phenomenon.
Well, and backing up a minute, you kind of have the how would you say? You have the chicks smoking the fumes or whatever, and getting these like technology, downloaded into their brain or whatever. And then a lot of those scientists, like you said, get scooped up by the CIA. Like this stuff culminates in basically the atomic bomb being dropped on the largest Christian population in Japan for no reason.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, well, I'll hold off on that because there's something I was going to say that's related to the next clip that we're going to play. Go ahead.
Was the dropping of the atomic bomb, was that like the last of the kind of like the super masculine? How would you say it? Because like after that, there's a shift into like subversion and subterfuge and Cold War and all of this.
Yeah,
it's kind of like the last
point.
of the
That's like the death of the tyrannical father.
Yeah, there you go. That's a good way of putting it.
Yeah, the tyrannical father.
That beast energy, and now we're just left with like the whore.
Yeah. It was kind of like the tyrannical father turned himself into a bomb and blew himself up. The tyrannical father committed suicide, and then we're left with and that's the birth of the devouring mother, who grows up from there. And then, so the next clip we're going to play here, as soon as we finish this one, we've got a couple more minutes in this one. The next clip we're going to play is a really interesting podcast series that I've been listening to. That they, in one of the episodes, they talk about the remote viewing projects that the CIA was doing 60 plus years ago. And this stuff it's common knowledge. It's just accepted and verified from all sorts of different sources that, these sorts of things are true. This sort of thing is real. The remote viewing, being able to like take your consciousness and put it somewhere else in the world and see things that are real. Like it's verifiable that people are actually doing this. It's something that's within the human purview, so to speak. We have no idea what the human consciousness actually is, like what it's capable of.
One thing that the Allies noticed when they went into Germany is that certain parts of the German war machine were unbelievably advanced. Like, people don't quite understand how crazy World War II was. The nuclear weapon, like, what type of futuristic sci-fi super bomb is that? That's the most bizarre thing probably ever to come out. The next thing up from that would be like space lasers. Now, another side of World War II that was just beyond belief crazy was the arrival of rocketry, the arrival of the ability for us to, shoot these giant missiles into outer space that they can fly all across the world. Like, you think about the super weapon of the modern age, it is a nuclear ballistic missile, a thermonuclear rocket that can shoot across the world. It's the combination of those two technologies. technologies. And this was something that really came out of Germany. Of course, where did NASA come from? The Allies came in and they found all these incredible German engineering projects that were so advanced, that were building all these rockets, like the V2 rockets they shot into London. And so they said to themselves, you know what, lads, maybe we'll cut you a deal here. Maybe we won't, like, you know, stick you up in Nuremberg and put you on the trial. Maybe what we'll do is we'll bring you over to America and you can teach us how to do this stuff. The Soviets went in and they were doing that thing as well. They were like, all right, let's get the Nazi scientists. They're fucking genius. I don't know what they found out here. Now, some people speculate that a big part of this was, this was them channeling some type of pagan force. And this force, this was giving them this spontaneous superpowers. These occult powers were giving them the ability to develop these advanced technologies. And again, I don't think people understand how bizarre and weird the thinking was at this time. The Nazis and these German engineers were thinking an awful lot about space, which is a very unique thing. I don't think people really wrap their imagination around what it must have been like back then. For all of human history, we were imprisoned to the floor. The heavens were up there, something that we cannot access. And in this short window of history, from about the mid-1800s until around about 1960s, 70s, and Elon Musk is trying to resurrect it, there was this obsession with reaching the heavens, going up into the sky. And it's really reflected in World War II. World War II really is the beginning of all this stuff. It never really fulfilled itself, but you can see that energy being burst. And of course, NASA, filled with Nazi scientists, developed that fully into the space race and into, you know, traveling into outer space and shooting rockets up in the air and the shuttles and all this. But the Germans were doing all sorts of crazy things, thinking really differently about physics and how to use engineering, how to use all this stuff.
I love his accent. Shuttles. Shuttles. I'm mostly just pausing it just so we don't get don't have it take the stream down. Josh Ham says, reminds me of 300, the Oracle of Delphi. I feel like women are much easier to connect to the spiritual realm, to mysticism, but it lacks wisdom to differentiate good or bad, knowledge of good and evil. And this ties into the next clip. We're gonna it's eerie how closely these two clips I'm gonna play for you guys align, because I listened to them like in the same day, and they were both touching on the same thing from a different angle. That was, I don't know, there's something kind of spooky about it.
They were, when the Allies went in, they would find all these just crazy attempted projects. Like, some of them obviously weren't really going anywhere, but some of them were like weirder than you think. One famous one is they were planning to do stuff like set up sun disks. So they were creating satellites that they were planning to shoot up into the air, almost like a mirror. And then the sun would shine onto this mirror, and then they'd be able to like Bill Gates, you know, creating a ring to block out the sun. They'd gather the mirror and then aim the sun down onto the earth, and it would shoot this this beam of light, this focused beam of sunlight, basically creating a laser beam out of the sky. Think about that. So the Nazis were planning to send this stuff up, and all the Allies would be coming in and be like, let's get these guys, and then this giant pillar of like energy would just shoot down from the sky and just incinerate everything around them. Talk about crazy hi-fi thinking. How wild is that when you really wrap your head around it? And there is another very...
Okay, so that was the extent of that clip. It is interesting that you have the point you made, Cooper, about the atomic bomb being like the death of the tyrannical father. That all of this stuff has this phallic
right
aspect to it.
Yeah, that's exactly what I was thinking.
Yeah. Okay, so this next one doesn't have a visual with it. I gotta give it to him, to Uber Boyle. Like, his presentation, his editing and everything is just phenomenal. And it's like, here, this is the way that the video begins. Let's share the screen again. He just jumps right into it.
There was nothing about Adolf Hitler's life that would suggest that he was going to become a great leader with incredibly powerful rhetorical skills, with the capacity to arouse people to a state of frenzy with his powerful words. He was never trained in formal rhetoric. He was described...
He's just he's a master of his craft. Okay, so this here, probably the best named podcast that I've ever heard. It's Jungle Bunker Telemetric Funk. And this is one I was telling Cooper about this. This is the guy who puts it on. His name is Space Age Maximalist, and his Substack, he describes himself as Von Braun's long-lost great-nephew raised in a secret Guatemalan space program bunker, preparing the world for the Holy Galactic Imperium while fathering future space pirates. I've been listening to more of his stuff after listening to this series with this guy, Stormy Waters. He has a phrase that he uses often called based esoteric engineers. And I just love that. I love that description, based esoteric engineers, especially when it's said with his thick German accent, which you guys will hear in a little bit. So a little background on this podcast. It's very, very esoteric. The first half of the first episode, it's a 3-part episode. Each one of them is like 3 hours long. And the first one was a breakdown by this guy, Stormy, talking about the remote viewing programs and where they came from and the different people who were involved in them. It's interesting. Rupert Sheldrake, who is seen as like a complete outcast and a loon and everything today, was actually one of the heads at I think it was the Stanford Research Institute. He and Dean Radin were the ones who were running these experiments with remote viewing and testing.
It's like the men who stare at goats thing.
Sort of, yeah. It's like you should listen to the whole episode, the whole first episode where he describes it. But basically, what they would do is they had the remote viewer, and there's certain people that have a capacity for this. The way they found them was they were looking within military domains. They would look for the guy who had vastly outlived all of his peers in his particular discipline, because there was this one particular combat discipline that the average guy would live like eight months in it, and this one guy had been doing it for like 5 years or something really long. So they identified there must be some sort of psychic capacity that he has that allows him to vastly outlive all of his peers who are all doing the same sort of thing. In the last video, he mentioned later, Uber Boyo mentioned later on in the stream that there was a story of Hitler where he was sitting in his bunker or sitting in a trench, and he's sitting there just like eating with some other guys, and then he just heard a voice that just said "move," and he just stood up and walked a little ways away and sat back down again. And a minute later, he heard a huge explosion, and he went back there, and there was some sort of munition had hit and killed all the guys that were around him. So there's something about what the scientists that were doing this deduce is there was something about these kinds of guys. They had some sort of sensitivity to this psychic realm that made them unique. So what they would do with the experiments is they would sit them down in a room. There would be the viewer and the partner, and both of them had to be chosen. Both of them had to have a certain gift for this, and they would walk in. They would have an envelope with some writing on it, and the writing would be coordinates to a particular location. That neither one of them would open the envelope, neither one of them would know what was in it. But they would sit down, and the one guy would start asking the other guy questions, and just start asking him. So the guy would close his eyes, and he would say, "Okay, what do you see?" And he would start describing it, and the other guy would have to ask him questions to draw out what he was seeing, and he would just write it down, and eventually they would get to whatever point they needed to get to, and they would stop. And then they were able to verify that this guy was the thing that he was describing was at the coordinates that they put in there. So he was actually accessing that. They have no idea how. They didn't give him any prompts. All they did is they had an envelope there with the coordinates on it. And what they also found is that it mattered who the person was who was asking the questions and in what order they asked the questions. That person wasn't being given, like, he wasn't sitting there going off of a notepad. He was literally just asking the question that came to mind to ask it. So there was some capacity for the human brain to access this information that it can't see. Probably more appropriate to say human mind could access this information written down that they couldn't see and travel to that location in their mind in real time. And they could smell, they could sense, like, all the aspects of consciousness. They would experience them remotely, which indicates that consciousness is something that's non-local. It's something that human beings tap into. We have some sort of a capability of tapping into it versus it being something projected out from us. But anyway, so related to this idea of Hitler being a sort of manifestation of the spirit of the German people, Stormy had some interesting takes on it. So let's speed this up just a wee bit. All right.
I like the sound effects.
I was just going to say, yeah, so the other thing is the episodes are broken up into chapters, and each of the chapters has some sort of a musical, it's like a musical interlude, basically, and a lot of it is really cool, really kind of like funky.
I was only a few yards away from the two men and could study them well. In comparison with Mussolini, Hitler made upon me the impression of a sort of scaffolding of wood covered with cloth, an automaton with a mask, like a robot, or a mask of a robot. During the whole performance, he never laughed. It was as though he were in a bad humor, sulking. He showed no human sign. His expression was that of an inhumanly single-minded purposiveness, with no sense of humor. He seemed as if he might be a double of a real person, and that Hitler the man might perhaps be hiding inside like an appendix, and deliberately so hiding in order to not disturb the mechanism. With Hitler, you do not feel that you are with a man. You are with a medicine man, a form of spiritual vessel, a demi-deity, or even better, a myth. With Hitler, you are scared. You know you would never be able to talk to a man because there is no one there. He is not a man, but a collective. He is not an individual, but a whole nation. I take it to be literally true that he has no personal friend. How can you talk intimately with a nation? How indeed, Stormy?
That's lovely. Yeah, there's also a very strange phenomenon with him and animals. I don't know if you're familiar. But birds would constantly, land on him and sit on, and stand on his shoulder or sit on his shoulder. And things like squirrels, which are generally very scared of people, would, run up to him and sit on his feet or, take stuff out of his hand.
Awesome. That accent is kind of hard to understand. Sure,
the German one?
Yeah, I'm sure after listening for a minute, you get it, but I had to focus real hard to hear that. That's interesting. I have heard about the Hitler with animals thing, and particularly the birds. I find that interesting because there is kind of this ancient symbolic association between birds and specific, birds and higher knowledge. Like specifically the language of the birds. Really interesting. That's all I had to add.
And there's something about like the way that birds fly, and the patterns that they're able to perceive. There's like frequency patterns or something that come from the earth that they're able to see, to follow for their migrations and that sort of thing. There's something very spiritual about birds.
Yeah.
It's very wild. Animals just, not like how they would act with a regular person. There's some interesting photos of it that I can drop. We can go into the man that was not a man.
Yeah, well, this was only one instance of a larger phenomenon, which I think you began to illustrate in the previous segment, and now we can discuss in full. So what was actually behind this figure? What is animating the man?
That was a quote by Carl Jung, if I'm not correct. And Carl Jung, even though he couches a lot of what he writes or what he would say to journalists as in a materialist framework, even his whole Jungian psychology is really just a way to wrap a materialist cloth around a spiritual, I guess I don't know if it's science, but I guess you could, a spiritual discipline, right? Because Jung himself was an initiate. He was a member of the same school, I guess you call it school of fraternity, the tradition, as one Julius Evola, a fraternal order that was started a very long time ago by one of the great Western mystics, Giordano Bruno. So Jung may have talked materialist to his friends, to strangers or journalists, politicians, and scientists. But when he was amongst friends, he didn't talk in material terms at all. And I believe Jung briefly said earlier in that interview that Hitler was a vessel possessed by a god, a deity. And I believe that to be true.
So when he uses this word god or deity, what do you think that is actually referring to? Or let's connect this to what we were talking about before with the nucleation and the warp and so on.
Possession. Right? If you notice that men like him never have children, right? Whether it's Napoleon, Caesar, the great men never have children. The men that just appear on the scene almost like history has called them up by pressing a button. Right? Like I need this guy again, because they're not there for that. They're literally a. So remember we talked about that mercury pooling on the other side of the plane, right? And where knowledge comes from, right? The difference between knowledge and thoughts. There are things that you build on top of them, but the feeling, right? The feeling comes first, and the feeling doesn't come from inside you. It comes from somewhere else, right? Because you feel things, an emotion, separately than you feel the thought associated with it. Whether an emotion that you create, right, comes long after the thought, right? You think of something sad, and then a moment afterwards, you feel sad. The two are not connected. Or if someone does something to you that makes you feel happy or feel love, the love feeling comes, sometimes moments before the thought of what's actually occurring. right? We tie them together, but they're not. So it's the feeling, right? Because that represents actual knowledge, right? That has weight on the other side. I guess you could say, yeah, in the immaterium. So what Hitler is there's so many people in our sphere, it drives me nuts, especially the accelerationist type fags. Actually, it's not just them. There are plenty of varying types of faggots that throw the term egregore around with no concept of what an egregore actually is. Right? There's two types of spiritual. Well, there's many types of spiritual life, but I will I'll only segment them into two categories for right now. You have the man-made spiritual entities, right, and the native, indigenous spiritual entities. So imagine that those feelings having weight, right, like little drops of liquid metal in the immaterium. So what was happening in Germany at the time before Hitler, immediately right before Hitler? What would you describe the conditions of post-World War I Germany before the rise of Hitler?
Yeah, simply atrocious. It was
miserable.
They had hyperinflation, they had famines, they had
starvation.
Total collapse of government, or sham of a government.
Yeah, child prostitution on every. There's a very good book. It doesn't intend to convey the message that it conveys, but if you want to understand what created Hitler, you have to understand Weimar Germany. And there's a book called The Voluptuous Panic. Right, it's written by I can't remember whether he's an English or a French aristocrat, homosexual, and he describes how great Berlin is, and how it's like the Sin City of Europe, right? He can go there and have sex with young boys one day or in the morning, and then their fathers at night, and their mothers the next day. And if he wants young twins, he can have young twins for the cost of dinner, right? I don't think he is conveying the information that he means to convey to another audience that is obviously not the audience that it was written for. But if you can imagine the type of emotional torment, I guess would be a very conservative way of putting it, that the German psyche was put through, a level of insecurity and depravity that I don't think many of us in our cushy little pods of today can really understand, right? The level of, I don't know, right? You have no job security, no monetary security, no food security. You don't know when you can eat or if you're going to have enough food. And you don't even know if you're going to be able to keep your family secure and safe from predation, right? So the amount of insecurity, right, the helplessness that the German spirit was going through. And if you can take that type of torment and assign an emotion to it, you would probably say that would be an extremely emotionally charged environment. And this exists, right? It's not a question of whether it exists or not. Space, I know you've got a couple of, girls in the bunker with you, and I imagine they fight quite a bit. So if you were to walk in, let's say, like you have an airlock, right, in your laboratory, you have your airlock, and they're fighting right on the other side of the airlock. You don't hear them, and literally no air can pass between the two of you, or the three of you, right? And they are having a knockdown, drag-out fight. And the instant they stop, you open the airlock and walk in. Would you be able to feel the energy in that room that you just walked into? You can feel it, can't you? I'm just using for an example, but you people say like, oh, you could feel the charge, you could cut it with a knife. Like there is this is what I mean by these things have weight, right? You can feel them.
I don't know why you chose such a particular example, because something like this did kind of happen to me once. But nevertheless, yes, indeed, you can feel the very heavy cloud of emotions in rooms, even outside of rooms. But when you're in there, it's even stronger. Yeah, absolutely.
Yes, 100%. It's something that every human being can relate to because they probably experienced it more than once. So this is what I mean by these particular feelings, these emotions have weight to them, right? The intention, it's not thoughts, right? Your thoughts are things that you pile on top of actual knowledge or actual intention. It's the intention that has weight. Like, this is why sigil magic works so well. We can get into that later. I believe you wanted to touch on practical uses in the last segment. So if you have enough of this weight, it begins to have its own gravity. So if we have the emotional torment of 79 million people, the amount of weight that generates in the immaterium, right? The astral plane, I guess. I really hate the word because it's neither astral nor plane. It's not separate. It is all around us. Like, we live in it. We just don't get to see it.
Yeah.
It exists just like we exist in the same place. But anyways, when that gravity gets to, I guess you could imagine it like a black hole, or how a black hole forms, right? When enough of it builds up, the gravity becomes denser and denser and denser and starts to run away with itself. And eventually it hits a critical mass and something punches through from that side to this side. It can either be a physical thing, like materializing something. We can do that strictly through intention. An individual can, if they're trained enough. But at a population level, the people will bring about. Now think about the quantum randomness generator experiment, right? The power of intention to shift causality, right? You're able to do this at scale. And so when 79 million people cry out for a savior, right? Someone to save them from this insecurity, right? The torment. That's exactly what they're going to fucking get. And that's what we call an egregore, right? It's not a material being. He may have a material agenda, or sorry, he may borrow a material being, but that's not really how it works, right? Because you could have had 50 Hitlers simultaneously. Like, the egregore doesn't have to just pick one. There's not a one-to-one relationship. But the difference between an egregore and the intention it comes from is once it comes through onto our plane of existence, it has its own agenda, right? You may be the starting point, or your group of people may be the starting point. You may have the intention that brings it about. But once it's inside the house, it does what it wants to do, right? As in, so like, let's say if that feeling of insecurity, of imminent threat, was what brought him about, right? He is going to solve that the way he wants to, right? So like, let's say there's a couple examples in history of, egregores being brought about by vengeance. Once he's here, it's here. It's going to get that vengeance how it sees fit. It's going to, it basically has its own program.
Yeah.
Right? So there's no steering it. It's going to go about doing its own thing. And then there are native things that, live there and that are always like that, right? But a good example of an egregore and the ability, not the ability, but it's kind of just in its nature, right? To whether it, depending on what it's supposed to do or what it wants to do, depends on how it acts, right? So with the German people, right, bringing about security, it's going to use one man, right? Because you don't get security without authority. You don't get authority without an authority figure, right? But like, let's say the Iranian Revolution is really, really informative. We see a lot of this, and like, I believe, and I'm not the only one to believe this. Evelyn and Carl Jung both believe communism, and particularly communist revolutions, to be a type of demonic possession. And a lot of the people that were living through the Bolshevik Revolution described these people as possessed.
Yeah.
I mean, you can literally look at any one of these like Antifa protests and look at the eyes of these people. There's a really great picture. I can't remember where it went. It's somewhere on my phone. It's like a wall of these. It's like a real picture. It's not like a meme or a drawing. But there's probably about 20 of these Troon protesters, all with their like signs, and they're waving. And sorry, it was a GIF, and I don't think it meant to show what it showed. But what it showed was 20 separate people having identical facial expression changes at the exact time. It was the same face on 20 fucking people.
Really?
The same eyes. Like, yeah, it wasn't like...
What'd you say?
I said, whoa, oof.
Yeah.
Imagine that. You're looking into a crowd of protesters and they all make the same face at the exact same time. That's sketchy.
Yeah, it's interesting how he disambiguates between these two different types of spiritual entities, basically. Essentially, it was kind of like there's like the native ones and then the synthetic ones. The synthetic ones are sort of like a they're like the product of the like collective focused human subconscious that is focused by a particular type of suffering or pain. That once it reaches a sort of critical mass, it's like the human subconscious spontaneously manifests a spirit.
Yeah, I dispute that.
I think what I think he's talking about is the spiritual analog to creating an artificial intelligence like the robot, the machines, like these sorts of things. I think this is a spiritual analog to that sort of thing.
I like his term, the immaterium. I like that term.
Mm-hmm.
My problem with egregores is, and why I dispute what he's saying there and dispute what you're saying, is it's emergent. And it's the same problem with like I don't mean to say that there is no such thing as like emergence, but it's only emergent. It's the same it's the same mistake that materialists make, where everything is bottom up, and that's just not how it works. There's always a meeting. So an egregore being like, oh, you got all the suffering down below, and then out of that emerges this sort of focused, spiritual reality. That does happen, but those are the conditions. That's the ground being sown for like kind of a principle to come down and meet. So I think there's always higher agents involved in these kind of movements. I don't think like egregores being just kind of, I don't know, esoteric groupthink. There's always an agent.
Yeah, I don't think we disagree.
That's what I'm
really.
saying. What I'm saying is like a demon.
Yeah, right. Well, obviously, yeah. I don't think we're disagreeing, really, because I think, I mean, the problem. Yeah, Miss Westford said I can't help but hear emergent as atheists cope. Like it doesn't. I think the premise of something like emergent is how do you even talk about this? How does it so emergent from what? I don't so like, and maybe this is me, maybe I'm misunderstanding what he's saying, maybe I'm actually critiquing what he's saying, but it's not that these things are emergent in a what would you say, like an innate. There is no nothing. There's no nothing, so nothing can be emergent. There can't be a emergence from nothing because there is no nothing. What we conceive of as nothing is actually populated with things that we don't actually perceive, but those things are still there. So it's that the collective human intention, or not intention, but the collective human demand. If you call for something, that thing will emerge.
That's what I'm disagreeing with. That call, that's the emergence. But
emergence from what? I'm using emerge like colloquially, like it will emerge as in like it will appear to you, it will manifest to you.
Right, but
you will have an experience of it.
Okay, you're calling out for that thing, and that thing's gonna. You'll cry, like as Uber Boyo said, crying out to the heavens, and then you got like your emergence, then you got your eminence, your emanation, and these are kind of like equal and opposite forces. I'm just saying you don't have one without the other. That is my perspective.
Well, I don't. It's like you're having you're saying something like adjacent to what I'm saying. I'm trying to understand what you mean by emerge. Emerge from what?
So the idea that you have a collective group of people or whatever who they, out of their situation, their focused attention creates this artificial spiritual reality.
I wouldn't say artificial. No.
Synthetic.
Okay. Yeah. Synthetic. It's like, yeah.
Like, I don't know. Like, I don't know what you would call it. Like like a zombie. I don't know. Like what are you? I guess I don't understand what you don't understand.
I'm saying that there's this specific spiritual phenomenon that becomes localized to a particular place. And the way it gets there is because human beings say, go here, whether they realize it or not.
Sure. Okay. Well, I guess what I'm disputing is that disambiguation he makes between native, what did he call them? The native entities and then these synthetic entities.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think there is a disambiguation between the two. I think the native entities are opportunistic, and given an opportunity, they will latch on to like a group's collective suffering or something like that, and then run with it.
Yeah. The way I would see it is like, this is like challenging the very notion of space, like a space or a location. But it's like you have an entity that has, like the spirits have their domains, the things that
I guess
they're in
what I'm
charge
saying
of.
is I don't think like groups of people create entities. I think the entities are pre-existent, is what I'm saying.
Yeah, and I didn't understand him as to be saying, and based on the other stuff I listed from him, he wouldn't be saying they are created by mankind. It's like they're manifested in this particular way in time and space by the intention of mankind. So like human beings collectively can manifest a spirit in a certain place in space and time. So it's you could use the term creation sort of colloquially for that. Like but there's nothing new under the sun. It's not that something went from nothingness, which whatever nothing is,
non-being to being.
Right. Yeah. There's no. That's not even it's like a poorly formed premise. But it's that these things manifest in this particular way. This particular spiritual phenomenon goes from the spiritual or the metaphysical or the whatever realm to actually having a manifestation in time and space, whether it's manifesting through a particular person or a particular nation or a particular group of people. Like, it has to be channeled through human beings. But it's that the human collective intention can manifest something like that. Now, it's not manifesting it from nothing. It's manifesting it in time and space. Is that?
I think we're talking about different things. I think we're talking past each other.
We must be, yeah. Because I'm. Yeah, there is no nothing for something to come from. Like, it's coming from something, but that something is a different something than what we're normally used to engaging with. Like, ancient people wouldn't have had this conversation because they didn't conceive of the world the way that we do. But like, to our mind, something manifesting in time and space, us having an experience of something is what makes it real. And if we aren't having that experience of it, then it's not real. Mm-hmm. So then to manifest something to where we start having an experience with it is not, it's not creation from out of nothing. It's not ex nihilo creation, but it's still creation of a form. Do you agree with that?
I don't want to get bogged down in arguments over stupid shit. Like, we can do that on the phone later. I'm just saying it's demons, dude. That's what I'm saying.
Yeah, yeah, obviously. And so is he. That's what he's saying as well.
All right.
There's a little bit more here. And then we'll get to our last couple clips about Thomas Massie.
It wasn't like an AI generated thing, but you're watching the same nonverbal communication spoken out of 20 people simultaneously. Right? And this is how these type of things work. So the Iranian Revolution, I talk about when I try and explain this because it's the easiest to explain, and we have documentary evidence of it, thanks to the BBC. I don't think the BBC, went out to post-revolutionary Iran to document the Egregore, but it accidentally did. And they're basically interviewing all these people post the Iranian Revolution. I believe the Iranian government, the new Muslim government, brought all these Western news agencies to come and be like, yeah, come check out how normal we are and how normal of a one we're having right now. And that's not what they found, obviously. So they're interviewing this old woman, and they're basically, asking her what's been going on. And this woman is ecstatic, right? Like, this bitch looks like she just won the lottery. And they ask her, they're like, what are you, you seem very excited. Like, what's happening? And she's like, oh, well, my two sons were distributing counter-revolutionary propaganda. So I reported them to the Revolutionary Guard, right? And they were hung this morning. Like, I'm just coming back from the hanging. It's fantastic. We just killed like 2 counter-revolutionaries. And she points to the women behind her. And they're like, yeah, they're with me. Like, their sons were counter-revolutionaries too. Right? We're all just coming from the hangings. And you see these women, like 3 or 4 old ladies, ecstatic. Absolutely, just it's the happiest day of their life. Their face looks like, remember like the special effects from back before there was CGI? And they're like the goblin or the gremlin or whatever was actually just like a little animatronic robot. All right, with just like moving around the rubber face. That's what it looked like. Because the eyebrows give it away, right? Like the eyebrows and the eyes, the relationship between the two tells you a lot. If you ever want to know whether you're talking to an insane person or a person that's even fake smiling, when a person smiles and their eyebrows don't lift when they smile, they are either having a psychotic episode or they are pretending to smile for you. Both of which are creepy, but the psychotic episode one's a little bit. Anyways, so these women are having a simultaneous psychotic episode, right? They just violated every single thing that their body tells them to do, right? Like once a woman has children, every single cell in her body, every thought and emotion that that woman has is focused on the preservation of those children. That's it, right? Like we've seen women flip cars, like little 150-pound women toss a car down the road because her kid was underneath it. So 3 women that just executed their children. I mean, if it was just one, that's something that would be on the news. But 3 or 4 of them simultaneously expressing the exact same facial expressions at the same time. Like I suggest everybody try and find this video. It will chill you to the bone because you know what you're seeing isn't what you're seeing.
But kind of inhuman power to completely revert everything in a human being.
Yes, they look possessed. It's the very first thing you'll notice. At first you'll think like, oh, this woman's crazy. And then you'll hear about like what she was just doing, and then you'll see the other 3 women behind her come up. And then you realize that just like those tranny protesters, you're seeing the same simultaneous nonverbal communications coming from different people simultaneously, like at the same time. Right? You're watching a whole bunch of people sing in one voice, I guess you'd say. So that's an egregore.
Okay, so an egregore is essentially this higher level distillation of human thought and emotion that takes on a life of its own.
Yes, human emotion brought to life.
Yeah.
And by life, I mean spiritual life, right? So human emotion, there is enough of it.
Yeah.
Yes, the human mind is powerful enough to manifest both physical things, right? So you can materialize physical things, and that's one separate process, one separate thing, and the human mind can manifest spiritual things.
So are egregores the only inhabitants of the astral plane?
Absolutely not.
Oh, then take me through the zoo, please.
Well, I don't know where to start. What did I have you? I think I told you to ask me something.
Yeah, do spiritual entities have a sense of smell?
Yes, yes they do.
Okay, I'm going to drop that off there to tease you guys. Do spiritual entities have a sense of smell? Because they go into very interesting directions after that. What was interesting to me with that is he's describing this. There's something that kind of really hits home here with the idea of a mother sacrificing her children. And we see that as like a really, really instantly easy to identify example of what it looks like when a mother has been subverted to do the exact opposite of what she was created for. Like the exact opposite of what every single cell in her body is directing her toward. My question would be, what does it look like in a father or in a man more generally? What does it look like when a man has been completely subverted in that same way to do everything against what every cell in his body is telling him to do?
I have some suggestions. I don't know if I have a definitive answer.
Hit me with them.
Prostituting his wife and children for material gain.
Mm-hmm.
That's one thing that comes to mind.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. What do you think?
I don't know really. Like it stands out to me that it's so easy to think of something for the woman, like a woman putting her child to death is like this archetypal action of the complete inversion of the feminine spirit. But the masculine one is like, if you'd asked me the feminine one, I would have thought of that immediately. If someone posed this question to me, what would be the most archetypal example of a woman doing the exact opposite of what she's biologically, spiritually wired to do, putting her children to death? What would it be for a man?
John says becoming a woman. That's a good example.
I think that's what it is. I think it's becoming a man or becoming a woman, which would be not just in the most shallow sense, but in the deepest sense. A man beginning to act like a woman is, I think,
Pruning their kid.
Pruning their kid. Yep. Which would be like the embodiment of a feminine spirit, essentially. I think that's. It's an interesting question, and it also is like, to me at least, it was interesting that there wasn't something that immediately came to mind as like the really obvious. There's some sort of an inequity here between the masculine and the feminine spirit. And I don't know if that's like an absolute inequity or if it's a product of having lived under the dominion of the devouring or smothering mother. Could it be a man becoming a villain instead of a hero? I think that, yeah. There's something about it feels like for a man, it's not necessarily something directly related to, it's something, it's not relational. That's kind of the impulse that I get. Like with a woman with her child, it's like there's a relational thing there, but the relational aspect there is like a feminine domain sort of thing. With the masculine, I think it's more something like that, like choosing to become a villain.
I'm trying to think of instances in my life when I've seen the crazed eyes that they referred to, because I've seen that before. And you can find pictures, videos. Like if you've talked to like an actual schizophrenic, like the homeless guy in your town or whatever, the drunk dude who's just like mad rambling, he's got the eyes and you know exactly what you're looking at. It's really unsettling to look at someone who's genuinely insane.
Yes.
It's really scary. And
because you know that you're not looking at them, you're looking behind them. Like you're seeing their eyes are kind of like a portal to something else that is outside of the access of your conscious mind.
And if you take the Jerry Marzinski theory seriously, that like paranoid delusional schizophrenics or whatever are actually just being tormented by demons, that even hits home a little more. And there is something like it doesn't, when you deal with people like that, it feels like you're engaging with something alien or inhuman. It just kind of like disturbs you on a very deep level. In any case, the times I have seen that, and I'm thinking of a couple people in particular that I've met or that I know, one that I grew up with, a good friend of mine from childhood, who is caught up in the spirit of the age and is well on his way to transing himself. And he's got that look in his eyes. He's not completely far gone yet. Like I don't think he's too far gone. He hasn't had any operations yet, but he's on that track. So I still have, like, I've had a couple experiences with him over the last few years, and he's still close, or he's still connected enough to where I'll get glimpses of like, okay, this is the guy I grew up with. But in between that, interspersed between that, like, okay, yeah, I'm talking to the person I know here. There's just, windows of time where I'm not talking to him. And it's clear I'm not talking to him. And one thing you'll notice about all of these people who trans themselves, particularly men, because I think women transing themselves is a different phenomenon than men transing themselves.
Yep.
For women, it's very much, it's like the new anorexia or cutting or something. It's a social contagion. That's how I see it. For men, it's, I've noticed the few I know, all they talk about is themselves. Every time you get in a conversation, everything refers back to them, me. They're like the most selfish people on the planet. And I mean, I'm not sure what all the implications of that are, but in any case, yeah, the times I've seen in my personal life that crazed look, where someone's deranged, two of them were schizophrenics. The other two were dudes who were transing themselves.
Mr. Westford said you destroy instead of build. Yeah, I think that's the subversion of the male instinct is directing the male consciousness toward destruction, toward elimination. Because I guess like the masculine spirit that drives humanity forward is the expansive, constructive, additive spirit versus the restrictive, contracting, eliminative spirit, which is the feminine side of things.
I think that is true. I think that's a true, and that may be more fundamental. Like, I think that's true, and maybe the trans thing is just like an instantiation of that.
Mm-hmm.
But it seems to me that there's like I can understand why a man might want to destroy something.
Oh yeah,
and I think there's a way in which a man, like someone who's very sober, very clear-headed, and for good reason, could be wanting to destroy things.
Mm-hmm.
Transing yourself it's a separate thing.
Mm-hmm.
Because I've never met somebody who's trans themselves or who's in the process of doing that who seems to be clear-headed and sober.
Right.
You know?
Mm-hmm. But also, like, transing yourself is not a like transing yourself is a relatively new phenomenon. It's had its other manifestations in the past, but I don't think it's a fundamental thing. I think it's it's a fruit of what's the deeper subversion that's happening here that's manifesting itself as the desire to trans yourself. And it's something about like narcissism and hatred of the outer world. Like the loss of I think women are supposed to be naturally suspicious and cynical about reality. Women are supposed to be that way. Men are not supposed to be that way. If a man is being consumed by cynicism or nihilism or like antipathy toward the outer world, then that's a manifestation of this subversion happening. That like men are not supposed to have that spirit. It's not that men are supposed to think everything is all hunky-dory and great and wonderful and all that, but it's that the discipline for a man is not allowing yourself to be consumed by the hatred and antipathy and nihilism and pessimism and cynicism toward the outer world. That's the women's domain. Women need to naturally be that way because it's going to be tempered by men. But if the men become that way, there's nothing to temper them, which is what ultimately gives way very quickly to the destructive phenomena that ultimately lead to subverting the women.
Are you familiar, if anyone wants a good example of this, are you familiar with Tonetta?
Mm-mm.
So Tonetta is like the moniker of this guy. He's kind of got like a singer-songwriter, if you want to call it that. I think he started in like the 80s. He might even still be alive. I'm not sure what he's up to. In any case, he's like a good example of all these things, like not building, basically just existing in your coon pod, transing yourself, abandoning your wife and children. He's basically like the nexus of all of these things, where he's kind of got like a cult following. He was in the lo-fi music kind of scene. And it's basically the story. I don't know the full story, but a dude who basically abandoned his wife and kids to go, I don't know, live as a recluse, dressing up in women's clothing and writing music. And you can listen to his music and you can see his YouTube videos where he's posted them, where it's basically him playing his music and then like dancing, wearing women's clothes. Tonetta, Tonetta. You could probably play a clip of him right now if people want to feel uncomfortable. It's nothing like pornographic or anything like that, but he wears like a mask and wears women's clothing and then like dances doing karaoke of his own songs. And it's really unsettling to watch.
Yeah, I don't want to play that. I don't want to watch that. I just saw some of the thumbnails and I'm good.
It's basically like Rick Farwell says in the chat, basically Buffalo Bill. Like, I don't think he's killing people, but it's basically like same energy.
Buffalo Bill?
From Silence of the Lambs.
Oh, yeah. I see, yeah. Huh.
Yeah.
Catching up on some of the comments here. John says, reminds me of a Twitter post yesterday of a guy who abandoned his family to trans himself into a woman. Hard to think of a worse outcome for the family. I think it's the abandonment. Yeah, abandonment. EC says inaction or passivity, a withering up or relinquishing of pursuit or potential. Yeah. Okay, so let's end this on a little bit of a lighter note. Speaking of someone who is not inactive or passive or abandoning his potential, shout out to Thomas Massie, the most based congressman. He's up in my former neck of the woods in Washington State. He says, interesting cloud activity here in the Pacific Northwest today. He's sharing some pictures of some interesting clouds. Look at that cloud activity there. This makes me, I think I know exactly where this is. This is Seebeck. This is where I grew up. This is like 10 minutes from where I grew up. I just recognized the clear cut on the hills up here. This is the Hood Canal. I'm almost positive that's where this is. You got this interesting circular cloud pattern up here. I wonder what would cause that. It looks like maybe a plane came in here, came around this way, and then went back out again. Very interesting cloud formations. I remember once upon a time when this sort of thing would have been seen as, no decent, self-respecting person would post something like this online. And now we've got an actual U.S. congressman saying, interesting cloud formations. Aren't those interesting? And I would say Mr. Massie himself would know. Number one, because of his status as a congressman, and number two, because of he's an MIT graduate. He is a peak nerd, absolute peak nerd. And as proof, so he posted this a couple days ago. He said, "How do people pronounce Appalachia? I'll post my answer when the poll is complete." And he says Appalachia is the correct pronunciation, not Appalachia. Appalachia. So he posted that, and someone said, once you go down the Thomas Massie rabbit hole, everything about him becomes more genuine and absurd. So watch this.
The geeks are three self-professed total nerds who normally prefer the slide rule to the sledgehammer, but are more than willing to get dirty.
We're the geeks! Hi, my name's Thomas, and I'm the team captain.
Hi, my name is Rhett Creighton.
Hi. I'm Coops.
We all went to the Massachusetts Institute of Technology.
We have 5 MIT degrees among us. Rhett is the physics major, so we're not quite certain if he's going to say anything practical.
I have all the theoretical experience.
Not sure what good that's going to do us in a junkyard.
Thomas has all the practical experience.
He's the master of KISS, keep it simple, stupid.
The geeks will prevail.
We're going to destroy them!
Secant, tangent, cosine, sine, 3.14159, integral, radical, UDV, flip stick, slide rule, MIT!
The geeks are three...
That could be a good place to set the mast and bolt the front end to.
But Captain Thomas has his mind elsewhere.
I'm worried the most about the sail, and I don't know anything about the sail.
I know.
So
that's why I got the mast.
I'm still scared about this aluminum sail.
Thomas isn't the only geek thinking about cloth sails.
Where does he find this stuff?
But Dennis is still pushing for sheet metal.
How we're gonna, once you cut it, remember that stuff? That edge, you just took it and went zip and just ripped right in half because there was no rolled over, sewn down edge on it.
We need to get these guys getting some aluminum, right?
I think so. I'm looking at this.
And you reckon you've only got the stuff to do a bad sail?
And I reckon in this junkyard you're not going to find anything to make a good sail out of.
I have faith in this for what it's worth.
I'd rather have a stiff sail than a flappy sail.
Exactly.
So, it may not be the fastest sail, but it's not going to go...
Exactly, it'll look good.
Yep. But, I don't know. I think Dennis had this in his head for a long time.
Really?
Yeah.
He's been hatching it. Didn't want to try it in his own life, so he's just on you.
He's waiting until he gets 3 people that'll spend 10 hours in a junkyard working on this thing. It's not cost him a dime yet, and he'll probably patent it.
This is the OG Gundo.
Control.
It's steel.
So we could put a drum on this side.
This is attempting a tricky weld. To make their chassis long enough, he has to join 2 aluminum I-beams. It's at a critical spot, right where the mast goes.
When wind hits a boat's sail, its forces pass to the base of the mast. The bigger the sail and the stronger the wind, the greater the strain on the chassis. With that weld being the weakest point on the geek's boat, it'll be the first place to snap if the wind gets up.
Any weakness in Thomas's weld could spell big trouble on race day, so Dennis gives it the carefully calculated bounce test.
Control.
A bunch of nerds.
And then here's their,
the mechanics are dead in the dirt. This leg is over for them.
Dennis and Thomas power home at a thunderous 25 miles an hour. First leg to the geeks and their aluminium sail.
The mechanics are dead in the...
Aluminium.
Aluminium. Let's see here. It says in the fourth clip, he's welding the joint for the chassis. The opposing side's joint broke, and the geeks won after the first leg since that deadlined their boat. Literally, his welding won the competition, which is 10 times funnier because there's another moment in the show later where, Massie looks at one of his welds and goes, "Boy, that's a crappy weld." He probably learned how to weld from a good old boy, really good back in Kentucky, and he knows what clean welds look like. That kind of humility is innate in people, and it's amazing he's managed to keep it being in Congress as long as he has. Yeah, so this is your reminder that if you haven't watched his conversation with Tucker Carlson, you absolutely should. It's very entertaining. He's just a really entertaining guy in general. He somehow manages to be both very extremely nerdy, but also very engaging and compelling, and knows how to have a conversation, and very lighthearted. He's got a fantastic spirit. He's got a great spirit. He says it comes partly from him not having the gene where he needs to be liked. He's just like, whatever, which I think many of us could do well to embody that. Anyways, we're coming up on 2.5 hours. I knew this was going to be a long one, but I appreciate you guys hanging out. Thank you, Cooper, for joining us on the ASTROLABE.
Yes, sir.
Are we going to be seeing the Olympic anytime soon?
By the end of July.
Ooh.
We'll have episode 1 ready.
Excellent. You guys are going to enjoy it. Well, do us a favor and like the stream, subscribe to the channel. Tell everyone you know about the ASTROLABE. Tell them they need to show up here and enjoy it. I've had a few of you guys tell me that you've really been enjoying it, that you enjoy starting your day listening to the dulcet sounds of my voice and the clips that I share. I appreciate you guys. Kingpill.com. Go sign up. You can join the Kingpill Discord. We did the Schizo stream on Friday night. I was up until like 3 o'clock in the morning because we did the Schizo stream, watched some Schizo stuff, and then sat and chatted in the voice chat for a while. So I think we're going to make that a weekly trend. Hopefully staying up until 3 a.m. isn't necessarily a weekly trend, but we'll do another Schizo stream this week, probably Friday night, assuming it works for everyone. So if you'd like to be a part of those, then you can join us. Kingpill.com. Sign up for the Kingpill Discord. And you got any last words, Coop?
No.
All right.